And we're back. John Delarose here, the leading Hispanic voice in science fiction, coming at you today with a special guest, a traditionally published author, believe it or not. This is like,
And we're
whoa,
back.
and
John
of course,
Delarose
I
here.
have to mute that, as you know. So we have Morgan Busse. So I thought your name was Busse for the
It is
longest time until I listened to your.
It
Oh, so
is.
your audiobook was wrong.
Yes, and my mother caught it, so we told them on the second book, that's actually not how we pronounce my name. So
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So I wasn't crazy. That's
Cool.
good because that's unusual. So and we got Katrina here today. I was mad at Katrina for wearing Tim Lim's hat and not my hat, but she doesn't have my hat.
Nope.
So it's okay. So cool. So you are a Christian author, which is what excites me to talk to you. And I think a lot of my audience are Christian authors or aspiring Christian authors or Christian readers. And so I don't know, where did you get started and where did you make that decision? Like, I'm not going to be like the, general, what do we call that these days? Secular something author. And where did you decide to like profess the faith in that? General. Yeah. Whatever that is.
So why did I become a Christian author versus just going general market?
Yeah.
Well, so that's a long story, but it was also an interesting one that I was talking to my son about the other day too. So it's kind of been a journey. I first started writing simply because I didn't see any science fiction or fantasy in the Christian bookstores. I didn't know why. So I blissfully started writing without knowing why. And then I found out it's because they don't publish that stuff. So that's how it all started. And then eventually I got picked up by a small publishing company and started writing. But I never had asked myself the question, why Christian and why not general, until I think it was after my steampunk series. And I hadn't signed on with Bethany yet. And I really felt, so just to give the audience, I'm married to a pastor. I'm a pastor's wife. So my whole life is ministry and stuff. And so I would hear a lot of times, well, you're preaching to the choir and stuff. And I came to realize the choir needs to be preached to. A lot of them, they go to church and, but their faith hasn't ever gotten any deeper than that. And that's where my heart and passion is. I want to rekindle and remind people of who God is and of everything about him and of the world we live in. But I do it through writing fantasy stories. So I slowly began to have a conviction that I want to stay in the Christian market, even though it is a hard sell. The other day, my son was like, Mom, why don't you just write to the general? You don't make a lot of money, which I make more than most people in this niche, but it's not enough to, my husband died, I'd be out getting a real job. So why do you keep writing in the general? And I told him, because I feel like this is where God has called me. And I don't know how much we're going to get into working with Bethany House and stuff, but I realized that God has been opening up doors because I want to show Christians that science fiction and fantasy is a great way to tell stories, and you don't have to be afraid of it, and that you can have one hand with God and theology and another hand in having an imagination that goes beyond, contemporary romance or anything like that. So I see myself as a pioneer for Christian fantasy.
I love that, and I fully support that. And the crowd around here has noticed a trend, I guess, in science fiction and fantasy where things really shifted. So if you look at science fiction and fantasy up until about the 40s and 50s, at that point, it very much was a Christian market. Most of the ideals presented were based upon Christian values, based upon Christian charity, Christian heroism in a lot of ways. Obviously J.R.R. Tolkien and C.S. Lewis were huge pioneers in the industry and really set the standard and the norm for the entire industry. And then everything kind of changed, and it just seems like as Christians, we just evaporated from culture and decided to just I don't know. I feel like it wasn't just science fiction, fantasy. It's almost every aspect of culture. It's just in the boomer generation, everybody just kind of just went, we're out. Christians aren't going to be a part of this anymore. And it just allowed this really nasty void to take over. And I think content got kind of bad from the 60s forward, as we've talked about a lot. And I think it's as a result of, our people kind of pulling back from the culture at large. So I'm really all about this effort to kind of reclaim things and restart things and jumpstart things. And yeah, that's pioneering that is a noble goal. And I think we need more of us doing that. I don't know. Is that not a good spot to stop talking?
Here.
I'm like, I don't know what questions you're going to ask or anything, because I could probably just take up your entire hour talking about it. So I don't know how many of you, your followers follow Mike Durham, but he wrote a really interesting article the other day talking about how indie publishing has really helped Christian fantasy and science fiction grow, which I thought was a great article. And yet I also see the efforts that I'm making as a traditional published author helping that along as well. Like I said, being with Bethany House has opened up doors to me that I never had open, even with working with Archive Publishing. I'm in a lot of bookstores. I probably at least once a week, if not more, I have a reader write to me and says, I never would have picked up fantasy. I've never read this stuff, but I saw your book. I saw it in a catalog. I decided to take a chance on it. I love it. I'm reading more. Who can you point to? And that's where I get to go. Well, let me share you. These people aren't with Bethany or anything, but they have great, solid books, great, solid Christian worldview. And so I'm able to filter my readers over to the indie people, which are great friends of mine. And so I see us working together like that. So, like I said, we're pioneering together to show that we can bring our Christian worldview into books and write good, solid, not cheesy stories.
That's the thing. You don't want to make it cheesy, and that's I feel like in the early offerings of sort of like the 90s and 2000s Christian revival in either music or books or whatever, you end up with what we like to call bonnet fiction a lot. And it just it ends up being these like very silly contrived plots that just like everything's supposed to be good and happy because God has a plan, yay. And real life that doesn't match, just like I feel like the current cultures, secular cultures, like darkness, like with Game of Thrones and all that, just everything's dark and everything's evil all the time, doesn't match reality. It's just and therefore it disconnects you and makes you feel false. I feel like that aspect of things also felt false. You kind of got to like be in the middle somewhere.
Yeah.
This is something one of my friends pointed out with a totally different art genre, but with Thomas Kincaid paintings, which are, and I hope I'm not offending a fan here, but that to me is like the painting version of that, right? It's supposed to be like, here's this warmth light of God, but to me and to a lot of people, it reads very like cartoonish and like it's just too far in that direction, as opposed to say paintings by Raphael or like the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel or something like that, where whether you're religious or not, whether you subscribe to these myths or not, you can't not be impacted by the dramatization of those stories in that case, right? And fiction, of course, is the perfect vehicle for communicating a worldview, and it's kind of a bummer to see anyone really abandon that, right? I mean, I'm not a Christian, but any compelling worldview put into particularly a fantasy or a sci-fi story is enjoyable to read regardless of your perspective, right? So I'm all for more of that wherever it comes from.
Yeah, it's good. And it's definitely coming in, the Ravenwood Saga, which I'm going to pull up the books on Amazon right now. Just kind of look at this right here. So this is your current series. And I discovered you with Awakened, your steampunk series. So yeah, the reason I'm like, yay, Morgan, is because she read steampunk, and obviously we're big into steampunk around here. And so I read that. I enjoyed it. It was like a you called it like a steampunk Frankenstein retelling, but it really was a very different story, even though that was an element to it, I feel like. So enjoyed it. I loved it. And some of the more background of that, at least on my end, is Morgan mentioned a company called Enclave Publishing, who she published through for a long time. And I discovered them probably 6-7 years ago. And I was just in Barnes and Noble, and I saw there was like a Christian literature section, and I was like, geez, this is pretty small. And I looked and I saw all these ladies in bonnets, and I'm like, oh, this isn't for me. And then I saw like 2 or 3 books just like kind of stuffed in there. And one of them was like, it had like spaceships on it. And I'm like, wait a minute, what's going on here? Um, and I saw it, and it was Kathy Tyers, and it was her Firebird saga on one of them. And Kathy Tyers actually wrote for Star Wars. She wrote one of the Star Wars novelizations, and did a ton of Christian science fiction, which is now republished through this company, which was Lord Murdoch Press, and then called Enclave now. And so they actually specialize in that. They come out with about a book a month. Am I wrong on that? Is that about right?
Yeah, we've had a little bit of a hiatus as we've been redoing stuff in the business background. But I know this month, the next book in Jack Kavanaugh's, he's doing kind of a political thriller, supernatural series. And if you don't know Jack Kavanaugh, he's a pretty big name. So it was pretty cool to get him into Enclave.
So you're actually involved with the business there. I thought you were helping out. I didn't know.
Nope. Cool. Once you're in once you're in Enclave, you're always kind of like a brand. All us authors talk in the background. We have our own little private group, and we're always helping each other and encouraging each other and stuff. So even though I'm with Bethany, I'm still there.
Good. So I discovered you there. And then Enclave, I found out, was having a presence at this conference, which is called the Realm Makers Consortium. And Realm Makers is a Christian fantasy and sci-fi writers conference. And I realized, oh my gosh, there's a bunch of us trying to do this. And I didn't know this before. And they have a Facebook group if you're on there, or if you're not banned from that site yet, that is. Or if you're still using it. We got to get them on MeWe or something like that. But they get together. They had one in Reno, so I was able to go because it's pretty close. And I think they're keeping it. Are they keeping it in St. Louis forever now? Is that the new thing?
No. I know where the next one is, but I don't know if that's public knowledge. So they usually go all over the country.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, they move around. They're good people. And so I went, not knowing what to expect. I didn't know anybody. And I kind of knew Mike Duran online a little bit because he ran in my same circles, and hung out, met some nice people, yourself included. And what I did is that's where I found your first book. I'm actually going to go to Awakened because I'm going to mention why that appealed to me. So this is where I found Awakened. Let's go to that. And I saw this cover, and I was like, holy crap, this cover is freaking phenomenal. And it's got the steampunk aesthetic. It's what I'm looking for out of everything. And so I picked it up at their little online bookstore. And because I think that's about when For Steam & Country was coming out too. And it was just great. It's like, oh, cool. There's 2 fantasy steampunk books out there, because honestly, as much as there's very little Christian fantasy and science fiction, there's also very little authors writing steampunk fantasy.
Yeah.
So it's like a double niche right here. And this cover's by his name's Kirk DuPont. And he has done a cover for me. Did he do the Ravenwood Saga too?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, he's the one who's done the Ravenwood.
Yeah, he's about the best cover designer I've ever seen in my entire life. I got to get him on here. And just incredible stuff. So I literally judged your book by its cover, and that's how I decided to care about you. So yeah, I got this at Realm Makers, and this was your last series, but this was not your first series.
No.
Let's go back. Let's go back in time. So you started with
my first series is the Daughter
of Light here.
Yeah.
And this one kind of went viral a little bit, right? How'd that happen?
I have no. It's.
You're supposed to be giving people marketing advice. Come on.
I'll just tell you the secret. Nobody actually knows why. I think it was a story that really touched people, and it wasn't cheesy. I really put my heart and soul into that book, and I wasn't afraid to have it be a little bit dark, because it's about a woman who can see in people's souls. That's going to be dark if you can see the stuff inside of people. you know, plus you got an assassin and that gets kind of dark, and so war, you know, and I had some people say the book scared them. I had some people say that it was maybe a little too graphic for them. I try not to go real graphic, you know. I usually live that people have imaginations. That's what that stuff's for. But
I love it. People have gone after you for this, and I mentioned this before the show because I wasn't sure if you actually wanted to talk about this. But I've seen people go after you because it's on the Christian end saying it's too graphic, and it comes back to you not wanting to do something cheesy. And I understand that. I mean, I'm writing. I guess I finished it now, but I've got a Christian series about to come up, and it's so graphic it's going to make yours look very tame. So. Yeah, and I think that's important. I think you got to do your storytelling, you know, in a way that rings true.
mm-hmm.
And I don't know. I mean, what do you how do you deal with people who come at you and go like, this offended me, when you're like, this is a PG book? Like, how is that?
Well,
How do you find that balance?
I've never had anyone say that to my face.
Oh, okay.
And when they do it, well, the most I've gotten is, "Oh, your book was really interesting." Okay, you know, that's fine. And if they do it online, I just put my husband on him, because even though he's a pastor, he looks like Stone Cold Steve Austin. He's a big guy.
Awesome.
Dan, they're hurting my feelings. Okay. So, yeah.
So that scares him right quick. That's good. So good job, Dan. I approve of that. Defend your woman. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, and then I'm standing behind him going, ha ha ha. No, I'm joking. No, I don't.
So that one was dark, but I mean, it obviously people liked it a lot. And Awakened is where I saw like people like starting to leave you hate reviews, and they did so.
You mean the one on Tainted? That one where the 2-star? So I don't know if you're going to read it or not, but
let's read the review. It's great. Oh, this is so fun.
I feel like I got a star for that one because I didn't know what he was thinking. I'm like, did he read the book I actually wrote?
Tainted. I'm sorry. I call Awakened. Tainted, the first book. All right, here we go. Oh boy. All right, this is very serious business right here. This review, and so we're going to treat it with the seriousness it deserves. All right, I'm putting it up on the screen right here. It'll be popular, but spiritually, it's a mess. I don't want to shame the guy. I'm going to take his name off here. Okay. No, despite being from Enclave, it's not Christian. It's not even clean. Wow. With violence, ugliness, accoutrements de horror, blood, torture, and this is the worst part, the sexual titillation of illicit lust. I guess you figure I didn't like it. You get a QP doll. I don't know what that is. The girl is pretty, vulnerable, and in real trouble. My favorite type of girls. The guy is tough, hurt, act out badly. That's my favorite type of guys. The father is unreal, evil scientist experimenting on humans. Cool. The mother figure is killed by birthing the monster heroine. It goes on and on. That's pretty good advertisement. I would use that as your copy for the description.
I hadn't thought about that. Yeah, I should put that in quotes. But
that's pretty good. The story is barely believable, though it's technically well written. At least you're technically well written. By the way,
research.
That's good. The technology, yeah, and by the way, I've read this series, and I'm halfway through Morgan's new book. Morgan's sort of prose professionalism is definitely like the top 1% of people I've read. So it's I definitely recommend her on that level for sure. The technology is not explained, or it's simply implausible. Impossible. Well, duh, it's steampunk.
Yeah.
It's a fun, worldly bit of entertainment. It'll probably be popular. Now we're going to get into the bad part. Spiritually, it's barely 2-star. It's not even really that. Old Testament level would be a step up. So wait, Old Testament is now bad? I'm confused. Okay. God's a desperation move looking for magic or wizardly help. He plays no real part in the tale. When the story just stops in the middle, God is the only but barely viable hope. There is no ending. It just stops with nothing resolved. Enclave gave me a review copy. Now I thought this one went into into the reasoning behind this, which was was it a different review? Because somebody got really upset because the male character was shown in a scene with his shirt off.
Oh,
right?
well, that might be something else, but
I saw that posted somewhere that somebody was like, "Oh my gosh, he took his shirt off, and that's too much for me."
Which I'm sitting here going, they never read my first series then, because yeah.
So you have to deal with this. So this is one of the challenges of being a Christian author is like, is people are looking, they're almost looking for reasons to be offended for it not being Christian enough. And that makes it really hard. And
last week, Christians take their shirts off. I mean, I change my clothes every day.
So the scene in question, it was very obvious that the male protagonist was walking in on a girl and a guy who were fornicating. Terrible. And here's the thing about this is that you actually cast this as that act is a bad light. They shouldn't be doing it. It's ruining this guy's, not only his life, but their lives as well. You actually make a moral point about it that's saying this is not good behavior and they should not be doing this. And yet people are offended by it anyway.
Well, I think they don't even think about it's from his point of view, catching his fiance with his best friend and how that devastates him and actually affects the rest of his life. When I came up with the title Tainted for the first book, it wasn't just about Cat being tainted by scientific experiments and stuff. It's about him being tainted by what's happened to him in his past and how he can't forgive that and distrusts women. So.
But you should never trust women. Sorry, guys. But yeah, so I guess people got really offended by that, and I just don't understand because this book is so tame, like just compared to what I read usually. I just didn't see a lot of that. There was a little bit of like, I guess there's a lot of character angst in it because your characters are very like just torn because, as he says, she is a literal monster and sort of comes to grips with that. But we can actually spin that. I don't know if this is your intention to go in, but all of us understand that we are that is like the Christian being. We understand that we are literal monsters inside, and we need God to overcome it. And that is like the ultimate sort of Christian experience. So, I mean,
you hit the nail on the head.
Right?
I actually took the whole idea from Ephesians 2, and it says you were dead in your sins, but God in his great love brought you back to life.
There you go. So
she became because that's what we all, and I also, there's at one point in Tainted where she says she's a monster. And I would say at least almost everyone at one point in their life has wondered, am I a monster? Deep down, where they would never show that on Facebook or anything. Am I a monster? And can I ever be redeemed of everything I've ever done? So.
And that's the big theme of it. And so it's a fantasy world, but you sort of incorporate the Christian God concept. From what I saw, like they pray and they understand God exists, but it doesn't get too deep into the specifics of it. So that's something I struggle with when I'm trying to write fantasy worlds. Like I want to present God as existent in another world, but I don't want to venture too far into specifics to make it heresy. It's it's a very weird fine line to have to write. And I might have gone way over the line. How did you do with that?
You're not going to put in like the Trinity or the systematic theology or anything. I got in trouble for that because I didn't do enough of that in one book. I didn't have baptisms, church, Bible study. And I'm like, it's a fantasy world.
Yeah, you got to be true to the world. It's a really weird line to balance. But nobody complains about that with Narnia. It's like it's very obvious what's going on in Narnia, and it's very obvious what Aslan is. And Aslan doesn't have a son, so much. He just is Aslan, and so I don't know. It's selective outrage is what it comes down to. I feel like when people get into this,
I think people are just afraid that they're venturing maybe a little too far away from what they feel Christian should be. My background is I was raised really conservative where I wasn't allowed to read science fiction or fantasy. I wasn't allowed to listen to anything. No rock music, no nothing. Luckily, I didn't have to wear skirts and stuff. But as I grew up, I came to realize that none of that really had to do with what the Bible actually says. And I found a lot of freedom in that. I was talking to my daughter the other day. She writes too. And I was telling her how our imaginations are like a kite. They can fly all over the place. But I said they need to have an anchor. And then once you have that anchor, you are allowed to fly all over you want to, as long as you know where your anchor is and where your truth is. And that's what you write from. So
Vox was talking about this on because they're doing a Mere Christianity study, and he says, like, there's really no good that comes from getting into these like minutia theological sort of arguments with each other, because it's like, what's the point? Like, we can't know for sure, and so it only serves to divide us in a lot of ways when there's really only one important facet of things, which is our faith in Jesus Christ, that he rose from the dead for our sins, right? And beyond that, you get into your Calvinism, or you get into your Arminianism, or any of this other stuff, and it just ends up people bickering over almost nothing.
They're spending their energy on stuff that really, for the most part, doesn't. I mean, it matters, but not to a greater degree. I have a feeling we'll get to heaven and God went, y'all were wrong.
Right. It would make sense. I don't think our modern culture and our modern mores really get us into good philosophical ground, even from as it is. It just doesn't make sense. So you can't worry about it, because if you're worried about that, it almost becomes a heresy, because it's like your works or your specifics are something that only you can figure out and somebody else can't figure out, and therefore it just kind of invalidates the whole message, the whole major good news, I guess. If you get there, it's I don't know, and that's interesting. I was listening to somebody talk the other day about how it used to be commonly accepted that if like the word had not reached like this tribe out in wherever, that they could discover God through the natural process, the natural world.
Mm-hmm.
And I think in our fantasy and our science fiction, that we can present this like sort of natural,
mm-hmm.
God exists, and I think that's what we have to do in order to get around some of these things, and that can contribute to salvation for somebody who hasn't specifically heard the message or whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess that's what you're getting at with your characters too. Yeah.
Yep. Exactly.
Cool. Now, I haven't noticed as much of a theological message in the Ravenwood Saga so far. I am about halfway through the first book, and it just feels like this is much more of a straightforward fantasy without like a, I guess the first character is like, I should pray probably. I don't get the sense that Celine is really doing that. So did you aim for it more general?
Just keep reading.
Okay.
I have some comment on the second book today, that on Flight of the Raven, that it had a lot of spiritual underpinnings, which was what I was going for.
Okay.
Really, the whole series was, that verse that talks about the man who finds a treasure in a field and sells everything he has to go and get that treasure. And that's what Celine's journey is. Her whole background and family is all about, is full of hatred and darkness and a power struggle. And then she's going to see something that she's never seen before, the light. And she's going to basically give everything she has to chase after it. And so that's going to be, I don't want to give too many spoilers away.
All right. That's cool. The concept of this one is we've got a girl who's inherited this power. Basically, she's called it dream walking. And so the ability to see, so it's your first, the ability to see into these dreams, which is kind of a similar concept for this one also. When I first got into it, I was like, yay, this feels like Wheel of Time, because we're walking through dreams and stuff like that. Now, your dream worlds are very different than Wheel of Time dream worlds, so it's not nearly the same thing. They're very much people's personal pocket dreams as she goes into them, and she can actually manipulate them and twist them, and that's the cool power that she's got through this. So where did that come from? just pop into your head one day?
Yeah, basically that's how these stories come about. Okay, so this is going to sound really funny. But originally, the story was just going to be about an assassin. I don't know what it is with me killing people. I'm not a Christian. I'm just kidding.
Big reveal.
But she's standing over this guy and is going to kill him, and then she chooses not to. And I'm like, what in the world's going on? Where'd this scene come from? And then as the story began to evolve, I didn't want to do what I've usually seen in stories. I wanted it to be different. So live on John's, podcast here. This is where I got the story. I got it from My Little Pony. Seriously. I was watching.
We have a lot of Brony viewers, so that's going to be a good thing.
My husband loves My Little Pony too. We watch it together without the kids. We're terrible.
Katrina, have you watched My Little Pony?
I babysat a girl once who that was like the only thing her parents let her watch, so I saw it then.
It's I've watched quite a bit of it, actually, believe it or not.
I believe it.
It's a very it's a very I mean it's a subversive show. It's all about family units like being the most important thing and loyalty being huge. I mean it's
really good.
Yeah.
And it takes different personalities and shows how they can get along and stuff. I'm just like, this is brilliant, whoever came up with this. Anyway, I was watching one of those, and one of the ponies, their job is during the night to watch over all the ponies' dreams. And I thought, oh, that's cool. But what if you turned it for bad? And that's where the whole idea came from, being able to enter people's dreams. And what should have been protecting people through the dreams became killing people and manipulating people and finding their secrets through dreams. So that's where that whole idea came from. Thank you, My Little Pony.
Awesome.
You never know where you're going to find stories.
No, and I need to not find as many stories because I need to focus. Is what I find. Do you have similar problems? Because I get a lot of like, how do you come up with ideas questions, and I'm just like, I need to stop coming up with ideas. I don't know,
I put them on folders in my computer, and all the ideas go in the folder, and then they get put away until my agent says, what do you want to write next? And I pull up my folder and says, okay, here's all my ideas. And he goes, that one's a really good one. Let's see if we can sell it. So.
Nice. All right. So this is going to bring us into traditional publishing. Now we rail on traditional publishing almost every podcast here. So you're on the hot seat now. So what brought you that direction? How did you go, I'm going to like grab an agent and try to sell things?
So, I am going to sound really old here. Back when I was writing, indie publishing really still wasn't a huge thing. It was still considered vanity. It still wasn't something people did. I've been writing since 2004, and I've seen a lot of changes going on in the publishing world. Even when Daughter of Light came out in 2012, indie still wasn't. I think that was just when it was starting to become a viable way of writing and publishing your own books, and that people didn't need the help of a vanity press anymore. So I've seen it changing. So after my first series came out, I wasn't sure what I was going to do next. And so I actually started joining some indie groups because I was always ready if there became a point where a publisher wasn't going to publish my stuff, then I was going to indie publish it. So I wanted to learn everything I could about it. So you could say I have one foot in indie and one foot in traditional. And it's always been, I'm going to publish this. If someone's going to pay me, great. If I'm going to do it on my own, great. So I've always thought about being hybrid anyway. So that's always an option for me.
And you seem to write pretty fast. I noticed like a lot.
It takes me a year to write a book. I don't consider that super fast.
It takes you how long to write a book?
1 year.
A full year to do one book, really? Okay, I lied.
I've got 4 kids. So.
Well, I guess considering that's pretty good. But I mean, I see you come out with books at least once a year,
yes.
which seems to be better than a lot of sort of the traditionally published people I typically see. And so that's good. So you're at least getting that going through there. Now, so you actually, like, when you started out, you found, get an agent and find a publisher was like the way to go. early
I
on.
didn't have an agent actually, because there wasn't any agents except. No, there really wasn't any agents that were taking Christian fantasy.
So you went direct to Lord Mercer at the time?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Wow.
Went right there. Yep.
Well, that was easy. All right.
Yeah.
Cool.
I've only had an agent for 2 years now, so yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I didn't. Okay. I had no clue. So we're learning about her career.
Yeah.
That's cool. But have you been happy with the process of having an agent? Like what? I don't know. What's it like? So you have an idea, and do you tell the agent the idea first before you set pen to paper? Or?
We work as a team. So my agent's actually Steve Lobby, and I love working with Steve because he's a great guy. He really gets the science fiction and fantasy world, and he loves it. That guy says he reads all the time.
He's a very good guy. I've hung out with him a bit. So
yeah, and so a lot of times we work as a team. Like I just finished up. I just turned in the 3rd book for the Ravenwood Saga a month ago, and so I contacted him and said, "Okay, do you want to see my next projects?" And so I sent him 3 ideas, and then he looks over it and he says, this one, the people I know won't be interested in this one. I would be interested in this one, and then. So he evaluates all of them, and then usually he's now out talking to all the publishers about my ideas. So, then he gets back to me, and I don't know.
So this is just going to be a trilogy. So do they have options for a 4th book, or do you write pretty? Because I guess with Tainted and Awakened, it was very much like this is going to be the story and it's done.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I don't know on this one because I'm not far enough through it. Is it a very similar open and shut scenario here?
Yeah, there's a small opening if I ever wanted to do a spin-off. If I ever wanted to, spin-offs I always have kind of in the background. But I think a publisher would really wanted to see take off big time. Now I do have a possible spin-off with my Follow the Word series that he is possibly shopping around right now, and it takes place 400 years before the Follower of the Word series, and it has a real Viking fantasy feel to it, which is kind of becoming popular right now, which might be, plus my heritage is Viking, so I've always wanted to dive into that. So
you look like a Viking.
Thank you.
Okay.
You don't want to see me mad. My husband calls it my Viking blood.
Yeah, so that's interesting. That kind of gets into the I guess the real challenge of the Christian publishing world is I've seen a lot, and I've been talking about this with a few people. I try to pick up as many of the Realm Makers people's books as possible. Same with my little Pulp Rev group, and do that. And I see that I guess with my Pulp Rev group, I see a lot more people kind of taking off in that secular room, in that there's kind of a group. And for if you don't know what Pulp Rev, it's like a return to the pulp's philosophy,
yeah,
where we're trying to just crank out books as fast as possible, just have as much fun as possible.
Oh yeah.
It's that sort of thing, and that's really doing really well through that 20 books to 50K group, where they're really ramping that up, and there's a lot of success there, and there's a lot of mutual support there. But I noticed in the the Christian fantasy world, there's a lot less breakouts from what I've seen. There seems to be a little less support for actually, there's a lot of people who want to do the books, but there's not a lot of people who actually want to support the books. I don't know. They just go buy Game of Thrones anyway. So it's how I don't know. Do you have any thoughts on that, or how we can build upon that, or what has been your success? Because you've gone a lot further than others.
Yeah, so I think it depends on your audience and what you're putting into your books, and that's always going to be as you see the case. You're either going to be too preachy, which is a huge turnoff to everyone, period, or you're going to have a book that isn't as well written because you're not taking the time to actually learn your craft, or you're having elements that make Christians uneasy to read. And so I guess for me, I always feel like I'm kind of on that cutting edge. I find it interesting when a lot of people say, well, CBA guidelines, well, there's no such thing as CBA guidelines, wouldn't let me do this and this and this. And
I don't think my audience knows what CBA is. Can you go into that?
It used to be, it's a Christian, CBA, Christian Books Association. So it used to be, it's not, it doesn't exist anymore. It used to be just a collective of where all the publishers would talk about stuff. But it's kind of a term you use for Christian publishing. But I think that some people have dismissed going traditional Christian because they just simply think their book won't get passed. I think no matter if you're writing Christian or non-Christian, you have to write really, really well. You don't be sloppy on those scenes where you have violence, where you have scenes that, I guess when I'm writing those kind of scenes, I'm not going to lay it out before you. I'm going to, like, you don't, okay, so I'm trying to figure out how dark to get here.
As dark as possible. We drop F-bombs all day long and all that.
Oh, I don't do So this is one where people got a little bit two things that got people a little bit nervous about Ravenwood series is I have a, she goes into people's dreams, and in my world, dreams are made up of all your memories. And she goes into the memory of this one girl who, it's implied but never shown, that her people that were traveling were attacked by bandits and ravaged, is kind of a nice way to say it. I don't show anything. In fact, she's dragged behind a tree and all you see is legs. But you don't need to spell out what's going on. In fact, I think it's a more powerful imaginative impact and emotional impact when you don't lay out word for word, scene for scene, what is going on. And I think I see a lot of times people want to just get real graphic about it. And
I think that's a really difficult thing to deal with. Like, I guess I found it much easier to write about like somebody's head getting lobbed off than it is to write about somebody like attempting rape. Like, it's just like, it's just something, there's like a taboo right now that like where we cannot even talk about this. And it's very real. And I think you will upset readers if you go too far in that, and that too far line is all over the map at this point. It's a weird thing to have to think about and write about.
Yeah,
I don't know.
My goal always is to make the readers think, maybe, and I want them to think, and I actually want them to feel uneasy, because we live in a world where dark stuff like this happens, and that has happened to people around them, and how this person's feeling, and then you start to understand why the servant girl's always been the way she is. She has a stutter, she's very shy, she's very scared, and you realize why, because she's been through a very traumatizing thing in her life. And from what I've seen, publishers, they might need to work with you a little bit, but they're not as shy now about having dark stuff in books, in Christian books.
That's a good thing. Yeah, I think being able to present the world as it is going to be a good way forward. Okay. Does anybody have any questions from the chat? Or Katrina, do you have any questions of like traditional publishing, anything like that, or Christian publishing, or anything? I don't know. My Little Pony.
Don't have many questions about My Little Pony. Yeah, I mean, I guess I don't have a particular question, but I think that some of the things you're talking about with respect to like what you show and what you don't show, and what, how you basically can't please everyone when it comes to feedback and critics and things like that. I think, I mean, for one thing, there's just owning your niche, right? Even if that niche is traditional or that niche is mainstream, it's like owning it and being committed to that. If your focus is commercial, I mean, you can always make the choice to say, I'm going to write what I think is cool, and maybe no one else thinks it's cool.
That's what I do.
You don't sell as much. That's fine too. But yeah, being, consistent with that sort of stuff, and unapologetic as well, because even if you end up regretting what you write or thinking down the road, it wasn't, you wouldn't write that today. It was still true for you. If you're being true to yourself, right? You're writing what's true for you in the moment. That's it. I mean, that's just something that's hard for artists, because you're growing in public.
Biggest, that little point right there, being true to yourself while you're writing, and really just being unapologetically true to yourself while you're writing. I think that's how you're going to come up with a story that's going to resonate with people, because people want authenticity more than anything else at this point.
Yeah. Yeah, and you're right about the graphic stuff too. I mean, for all the talk about, Game of Thrones and all the rape and stuff in it. I mean, if you read the book, there's nothing graphic in the rapes. They just happen, right? I mean, it's like, oh, she was raped 100 times. That's usually what he says, right? When that girl's like raped by the mob or whatever, there's definitely not a lot of detail. There'll be a detail if it's attempted, right? And someone fights the person off.
Yes.
Or something like that. But if it actually happens, it's just kind of stated that it happens. I've only read one book where there's actually graphic detail of every single thing. And there's a lot of rapes in that book. And it's like, it's not, it's bad writing. I gotta say, like, I mean, I'm open to a lot of different sort of possibilities. And it's a very realism. Well, I don't know how you want to describe it. That book has too much detail about a lot of things. There isn't any extra detail for the rape. The rape has the same amount of detail as literally everything else in that book. It's just a too detailed book. And it does kind of show how, I mean, that's the job of an artist, right? It's like, we're not journalists, we're not documentary filmmakers, we're not photographers. You're supposed to look at reality and pull out the parts that are essential to the message that you're trying to put across. And when you don't have that filter, you're not an artist fundamentally. Like, you might be telling a story, but you're not an artist.
Yeah. Also, you can actually lose your message because all the person is focusing on is the details of the scene rather than the story you were trying to tell. That's all. That they're not thinking about the story you were telling anymore. They're just like, the details are filling their brain, and I want to move the story along, but I leave it for their imagination,
Yeah. Yeah, you did an excellent job of that. You're definitely one of the best writers out there, in my opinion, for sure.
But then you have a challenge with that, and I fully endorse that, and it's definitely my preference. And I'm definitely I feel this way about film too, right? Like Rosemary's Baby is more impactful because you don't see what she's looking at the end, right? And I hate this like CGI, like let's go special effects crazy and show everything. Special effects correctly used is pretty cool. There's something kind of neat about the baby on a razor head and creepy and whatever, but like, it has to be done strategically instead of just seeing like what's the most explicit thing we can put out there. But also the trends are so heavily in that direction. Education is so poor and IQs are not as high as they used to be. I think it's not necessarily true anymore that it's more impactful. It's more impactful for certain people who have that imagination, but not everyone has it anymore. I mean, I've been shocked by some of the conversations I've had with people. There's this play that's, I don't even remember who wrote it. It's kind of obscure, I guess, but it's called Monavana. And like the opening of the play is this guy going blah 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 to his son, and he's basically pulling a Polonius intentionally and trying to distract his son and delay him while the son's wife does something else, which is basically what kicks off the plot. And I was amazed at the number of people who, they're grown ass adults, right? They had decent incomes, so they had to be fairly intelligent, who came out of the first act of that play saying, well, that didn't make any sense. Why was that guy just going blah, blah, blah when his son was clearly so distressed? And like, why is this like, that actor must suck. That must not be the right portrayal. And it's like,
it went over.
You talk about late. I'm like, okay, like I know we're used to having, and like, that's the problem with film now as being the medium everyone's involved in, because film almost always hands you everything just by its nature, right? Because it's going to show it to you. Like when you occasionally get films out there, David Mamet is pretty good with these, but every once in a while you do get films out there where not everything is told to you, or things are communicated with just the visual and not the visual plus words, or something like that. And things aren't laid out, like characters aren't spelling out their motivations. And you can just see from the feedback from people in general, and even the critics, that people like don't get it. Like they are like too stupid, too poorly educated. And that's where an artist kind of has to ask themselves this question of like, am I writing for this general audience today? Am I writing to make money today? Or am I writing to have influence into the future? Because we're going to come around again. I mean, common people used to watch Shakespeare and like it. So it's possible, you know, it's just not where we're at today.
Yeah.
It's rough. And this discussion made me think of your characterizations in your book. I very much appreciate that you write characters who, in a fantasy world, I feel like there's this. I feel like most female characters I read in fantasy fiction, at least modern fantasy fiction, just come off as just completely unrealistic because it's like everybody's trying too hard for that lowest common denominator that Katrina is talking about, where everybody's just kind of stupid to go like, wow, she's a badass. And so it's ever since Joss Whedon ruined everything in everything, is my opinion. I loved Buffy the Vampire Slayer, but I think what he did presenting like, Buffy and Sarah Michelle Gellar as just this like complete badass who can kick anybody's ass any time of the week, it became the archetype that everybody then had to follow. And from that point, like you're not allowed to show weakness, you're not allowed to show vulnerabilities and all that. Your characters, while they end up having powers, like the dream walking in this one, or like the sort of the Frankenstein abilities in your steampunk series, they're very insecure people, which is very normal for like a teenage girl to be going through, and they're not out there just displaying their power. They're out there like, maybe I can do this, I don't know, and it feels so much more realistic to have that sort of element of things, and I really appreciate that. Do you consciously work hard on that to try to create real characters in that and sort of buck the, I guess, archetype, or
I never really think about it. I just, when I'm writing a character, I completely put myself in their head. What are they thinking? What are they feeling? Why would they be doing this? So I guess for me, I grew up in a family that a single mom raised me. All the women are very, very strong and powerful. So that's one thing, is I love powerful women, but I've also seen my mom break down and cry when she was trying to raise 4 kids by herself. So I know strong women in the privacy of their homes and stuff also cry. And I wanted to show that you can be a strong woman who is trying to do what's right and trying to save the world. And yet when you're all alone, you're like, I don't know how I'm going to do this. I don't know how to do this. I can't do this, but then you get back up and you get back into the battle again. Those are the kind of women I like to write.
That's cool. Yeah. I appreciate the nuance there. It's something that I feel is lacking a lot. And I'm very interested in book 2, which is the book that just came out, Flight of the Raven. If you guys didn't see that right away, but I guess she ends up getting married and ends up being like a traditional sort of role that she has to balance with her powers at this point, which is cool.
Yeah, I really have loved writing because I've always wanted to write about a married couple. I think in some ways that a married couple find that they are stronger together than apart. So my most favorite couple ever was Luke Skywalker and Mara Jade. And I hate that Disney took that away because I don't know.
We all hate that. We're there with you right now.
But I loved when they were together, they would fight together. They were equal. They were amazing people apart. And then when they were together, they were unstoppable. And I'm like, I want to write a couple that are like that. And so that's what you're going to start to see with Celine and Damien as they start to work together and as they start to realize together they are more powerful than they ever were apart.
I appreciate it. I feel like so much of culture, again, just like focuses on that, like, the I guess the beginnings of relationships where everything's like, and everybody's just, kind of flipped out head over heels in love with each other. And, then there's betrayals and breakups and all that. And they just never, either it ends, in romance, it ends, they get married or whatever, and you never see anything after that, or they just don't, because I don't know why. But yeah, that's quite a subversive kind of culture.
I really enjoyed it. I just, but there's also, it's not perfect. They have a fight and they're still learning how to trust, because that's what it was. That's what it's all about, learning about each other, finding out where your strength is and their strength is. And I guess in some ways it's a small peek into my own marriage. I love the man I'm married to, he respects me. I respect him. We're a team in a lot of ways. You know, I always tell people our marriage is kind of like Star Trek. He's Picard, I'm Riker, and we're running the Enterprise. You know?
That's kind of awkward analogy.
I love it. But my husband is bald too, so it kind of works. And I sometimes drag him into the ready room because we need to have a talk about something, but the rest of the staff doesn't need to hear about this. So,
awesome.
Yeah.
So yeah, so you're balancing this with you mentioned. Am I allowed to talk about your kids? I don't.
I mean,
just a little bit. So you have 4 kids at least.
I have 4 kids.
So
yeah.
so you're doing the mom thing as well. So how much time do you dedicate to writing versus how much time is dedicated to your kids? What's your sort of process there?
So as we were talking, I write a book a year, which seems to be a good pace for me because I spend so my kids go to school, public school. So while they're at school,
my condolences.
Right. Hey, I'm also a part of the public school, and I have family members that are teachers. It's changing, but I feel like I can make a difference by being a part of in it. So that's what we do. So when they're at school, I write, and when they come home, I don't write. You know, the only time I'm ever writing is when I get my editorial letter back, which right now I just got my editorial letter back, so the kids know Mom's going to be really working for the next 8 weeks, and we're going to be eating lots of pizza, which they actually like. So, but it's always been important to me to not writing take over my children's life, but I also have deadlines. It's not like I can shirk off not writing, you know. So that's worked out so far for me.
That's good. So I have 2 kids, and I have a day job also. And it's very much a challenge. I basically gave up all hobbies and friends is what I ended up doing. And so I just write from, after they go to bed at 9 till about 11. And then if I'm not streaming on my lunch break, I write during my lunch break. And then my third thing these days is my kids are involved in baseball big time. So when they're not out on the field or they're not up, I just open up my laptop and I just try to get in some words real quick. And the other parents at the games hate me for that, but it's, to get this done, I just got to do it.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. I do that a lot. Football practice, basketball practice. I have my laptop with me,
We're so social. It's great. Yeah, it's got to do it though. Cause I think sacrificing the kid time is not worth it. There's honestly nothing worth that. So, yeah, you seem to be doing it right.
No, when you realize that even though you're with them for 18 years, that's only probably about 1/4 to 1/5 of your life. It's not that much time to sacrifice to make sure you raise up a generation of kids that want to hang out with you after they're adults, So.
Yeah. Now, do you say, well, I guess with your husband in ministry, you're pretty active about, at least making sure your kids know the Bible, even though they're in public school, right? So you, I would imagine.
They're not pagans.
Okay, that's a good thing.
No, for us, the biggest thing is we always want faith to be genuine. Our kids, the faith has to be theirs. It is something they have to choose to follow. They're allowed to ask all the questions they want. We talk about God. We share our faith with them. But in the end, it's never been our desire to. The world is a place now where if they're going to follow God, they have to follow him with all of their heart, and it has to be a choice they've made. So that's how we raised them.
Excellent. So that's a great place to end because I like that message, I guess. Katrina, you got anything else?
Nope.
All right. So we'll call it there. Please buy Morgan's books and support her. Morgan has, I congratulated her the other day. She's got her beautiful orange tag here, which is my favorite orange tag in the whole world. #1 new release in Christian fantasy. So that thing is, whoops, that's your face. There we go. This thing is really hard to get, and there's not. I feel like it's an exclusive club when you get there. So, so yeah, support her work, support Christian fantasy in general, and I hope you'll pick this up and check it out. Cool. And I'll stop broadcast. See you.
Thanks, Sean.